Good morning, everyone, and welcome to a special edition of the MMA OB Daily Podcast. I'm your host, as always, Adam Merton, joined by my co-host, as always, Cole Shelton, and we'll be giving out our 2010s MMA Decade in Review Awards. I'm looking forward to doing this podcast with you, Cole. Obviously, we didn't have an event to cover this week or even last week, so I still want to talk to you, though, man, because there's always a lot to talk to you about, and I'm excited to do this show. Just initial thoughts on the awards that we're going to hand out.
Yeah, we came up with a cool list. I think, again, similar to what our year-end was. We stayed away from picking the same thing, so we all have different answers. So just because it gets boring if you need fighter of the decade, fight of the decade, it's all the same, and we basically get the same answers. So we went different, so it should be good.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, let's start with the awards. I'll go with you first, and then I'll give mine out. And again, we picked different winners for every award because, again, like Cole said, it's just boring hearing 4 or 5 people agree with Masvidal being fighter of the year or Adesanya. It's just boring. I'd rather have different opinions. Okay, let's start with the best fighter of the decade for the 2010s. Go ahead, Cole.
Yeah, my fighter of the decade is Jon Jones, just to see what he's done. He's just reigned supreme over the light heavyweight division. Obviously, the drug stuff and suspensions kind of hinders his legacy a bit, but just what he's been able to do. He beat DC twice. I know one was a no contest. Beat Gustafsson. He's just beat everyone up there at light heavyweight, and he just dominated everyone. He's kind of the only guy to beat kind of like 3 generation fighters. Like he beat Shogun, he beat the Rampages. And then he beat like Cormier, which is part of his generation. Now he's beating the young up and coming guys. He's beating like the Santoses. He's fighting against Dominic Reyes. Like, to me, he's just been the most complete and most dominant fighter of the 2010s.
Great pick. I mean, it's hard to go against Jon Jones. The guy is pretty freaking amazing, and definitely a good pick, Cole. You know, for me, it's a tough one because honestly, I think Jones, based on his record and stuff, like you have to go with him, and based on his accomplishments, like he didn't lose this decade, Cole. He didn't lose one fight. He had the one no contest against DC, but that was a knockout win originally. I think he went 16-0 and one no contest in the decade. That's insane. That's insane, especially at the beginning of the decade. You know, a lot of people are gonna talk about the later parts of the decade, but at the beginning of the decade, this guy was like the biggest star in the sport, I think, and just an incredible fighter. He still is. So great pick, Cole. For me, I'm going to go with Conor McGregor, though. And, Conor, he did lose a few times for sure, but he still had a winning record. I believe he was 18-3, if I'm not mistaken. Let me double check that, but I'm pretty sure that's what he had as a record during the decade. Let me double check that quickly. I remember I did the article last week for BJ Penn. So 2003 and 1. Yeah, 18-3. That was his record. Okay, so yeah, you know what? Cole, I mean, as far as like significance of the sport goes, like I think it is Conor, man. And people don't like the guy, and I get it, but like look what he did to the sport, Cole. He changed the sport, he changed the game, and what he did in 7 years because he wasn't in. Well, I am including his Cage Warriors fights because they're still fights, but especially what he did in the UFC over the last 7 years, like insane. And the crazy thing is, like he missed a lot of time too in the latter part of the decade, but I still think that record's amazing. He's got actually more wins in the decade than Jon Jones, so that's pretty insane. I just think, becoming the first double champion in UFC history, that's incredible to win the featherweight and lightweight belts at the same time. And look at some of his wins, Cole, too. Like Eddie Alvarez, Nate Diaz, Jose Aldo, Chad Mendes, Dustin Poirier, Max Holloway. That's a good freaking list of wins. So for me, it's going to be Conor. And Jones is a great pick. There's also a lot of other fighters you could pick here. Like Khabib is up there. DC's up there, Cole. You could go Ronda Rousey or Amanda Nunes if you wanted to make that argument as well. So there's a lot of really good fighters that are in the conversation. But for me, it's Conor just because of what he did for the sport. And for Cole, obviously, it's Jones because he was the most dominant fighter as far as in-cage stuff goes. All right, Cole, next up, we're going to do fight of the decade. Go ahead, buddy.
Yeah, mine's a fight I watch everyone. Like, I watch all the time. And just there's like that legendary picture by Esther Lane of them staring down. It's the Roy McDonald, Rivalry 2 for the belt. That fight was just – that's one of the best fights. That's probably the best fight I've ever seen. Just them going back and forth. That was such a close fight. The stare down in between rounds of them both them bleeding. Like McDonald's nose was cut open. Lawler's lip was cut open. It was just such an entertaining fight. There's no dull moments in the fight. And the ending too, like the TKO. Like it's just McDonald fought through a lot. And then we've seen like the after effects of it. Like McDonald's nose has never been the same after that fight. A lot of people think like Lawler took a lot out of him. McDonald's never been the same fighter. Just that fight to me is the best fight of the past decade.
That's an amazing fight. I was like one of the few people that was on Lawler in both fights that they had. I just really believed him in that matchup. and it was insane. Like the first fight was okay, it was pretty good. The second fight was a classic though, the 5 round fight. Just an amazing fight, and like you mentioned, it's that image of Rory's like with his face is busted open, that nose is broken wide open. That's an image to remember for sure. An amazing fight call. I'm going to talk about that card in a little bit here, but for me, I honestly couldn't pick because I think there's a tie here for me. I'm going to pick one non-title fight, one title fight. So non-title fight, Shogun versus Hendo won. Both fights were amazing. The second fight's incredible too. But that first fight, Cole, like when I was watching that fight, I remember saying, wow, this is literally the greatest MMA fight of all time. Like it was amazing. And I was actually working at the Score at the time. And I remember going to work the next day and Moro was there and he was like raving about the fight and I was too and everyone was. So I think everyone loved that fight. You talk about like iconic images, Cole. And that's what I love about some of these fights, the iconic images. That image of Hendo and Shogun like hugging outside the arena afterwards when they have the bloody t-shirts, bloody faces, bashed and bruised. It's an iconic image. It was an amazing fight. It really was. UFC 139 was an incredible card, one of the best cards of the decade. We'll talk about that in a sec. That card was insane, Cole. Like, go back and look at that card, man. There was 2 fight of the nights because Shogun and Hendo was amazing, but so was Wanderlei Silva and Kung Lee. That was a sick fight too. You also had Faber beat Brian Bowles, who was a big star at the time, and then you had Ryan Bader winning by knockout Michael McDonald. Also, Chris Weidman was on the undercard. He won. So it was a crazy card, Cole. But honestly, Hendo Shogun, like it was such a close fight. It could have been a draw. It could have been a Shogun win. Hendo won the fight. Obviously, we saw the second fight. He knocked him out. But that fight, Cole, like for me, that's the stuff of legends. But, for a title fight, it's got to be Gustafsson and Jones. And this was a really tough one for me because I have like these fights mean so much to me. Like the Shogun and Hendo fight was like when I started writing my MMA in 2011. That fight happened in 2011, like maybe a few months after I kind of started my like career as a writer. And that means a lot to me because I was like, wow, I really did pick the right sport to cover. But the Jones Gustafsson fight, I was there live. I remember just being absolute awe. Like it was an insanely good fight, and none of us thought Gus had a chance in that fight, Cole. Like everyone was picking Jones. You were like 3 years old at the time, Cole. But just messing. But the rest of us, man, I remember watching. I was sitting beside my friend Sean Smith. I don't think he covers MMA anymore, but he's still on Twitter. And Aaron Bronstetter was right behind me. And excuse me. I just remember being like in absolute awe of the fight. And actually, the fight was so good, Cole. And you can ask Aaron this. He tells the story to everyone. I started crying because the fight was so freaking good. Aaron's like, "Are you crying?" I'm like, "Yeah, this fight's so good." And I remember going and sitting backstage. It was me, Ben Folks, and Chuck Mendenhall in the same row. And we're just like, wow, that fight was so freaking amazing. Like, everyone was just raving about the fight, Cole. Like, that's a good memory for me. It was actually one of the last I think it was like one of the last UFC cards I covered in person. Unfortunately, they don't come to Toronto that often. And also, like, I wasn't really working for sites with credentials up until Sherdog last year. But it is what it is. But yeah, it was that fight meant a lot to me. And it was an amazing fight, Cole. Gustafsson did so well. I remember that takedown the first round he had, and then that spinning back elbow, I think it was in the 3rd or 4th round by Jones. It really changed the tide of the fight. So, for me, Cole, that's going to be the best title fight. And I just can't pick between the 2 fights. That's why I had to mention them both. They're just 2 such like epic, legendary fights. Love them both.
Well, even that fight, like I remember going into it, like everyone thought, "Oh, this is a walkover." Dana White had to tell the crowd, like they were telling people in Toronto, like, "No, this is going to be a good fight. Like this isn't a walkover. Like Gustafsson's good." And I remember Jones after he's like, "I didn't take this serious. Like I was partying all before the fight because he didn't think Gustafsson was good." Now it turned out to be like probably Jones's best fight and most competitive fight of his career.
Yeah, it really was the best fight of his career. And I think Gustafsson had a lot to help with that. The rematch, I think a lot of us thought the rematch was going to be a close fight, Cole, but it turned out to be a drubbing for Jones. But yeah, and any thoughts on Shogun Hendo, Cole?
Yeah, I've seen that a couple times on Fight Pass. Like that was a good fight too, but for me, more like I liked Jones Gustafsson better out of year 2. But those 2 fights, you
watched it. You were like 1 year old.
Year 2 fights, like there were so many good fights to choose from to narrow this list down to one.
It's tough. I mean, like there was some really good fights this decade, and we had to pick a couple here. Okay, so let's go to knockout of the decade. Go ahead.
Yeah, so my knockout of the decade might not be the most flashiest, but to you is the most significant in what it did for the sport. Is McGregor's knockout over Aldo. Do it in 13 seconds. Aldo was supposed to be like he was greatest of all time. Like he's never been like he was dominant at featherweight, McGregor talked a lot. Everyone thought, oh, this is when he's going to get exposed. Like, there's even that thing they're playing before now. The McGregor Cerrone fight is Cerrone saying like, "You're going to get your ass beat by Aldo," and to go in there and not just beat Aldo. Like beating Aldo was impressive, but to knock him out on the first punch he threw, that was just like. And then obviously the cage celebration that set up like that just set up his whole career, set up him becoming a championship, setting up the Diaz fight. That made him, I think, that was the fight that really pushed forward to being a huge superstar in the sport.
Yeah, that was incredible. Remember that one really vividly. And, I get a lot of my predictions wrong, but I got to give myself credit when I do get them right. And on the lead up to that fight, me and James did a podcast. I believe it was me and James. And I said, Conor McGregor's going to walk across the octagon and knock Jose Aldo. And he did exactly that. And I was pretty shocked that I got that one right. But yeah, 13 seconds into the fight call, and it changed both of those guys' careers. Aldo for the worse, Conor for the better, obviously. Just an amazing performance by Conor. I mean, really was. So great pick there, Cole. For me, this is another hard category. Like I had a hard time picking one and really just choosing one here. So I'm going to name a few. And to me, it was the decade of the head kick, Cole. Like there were so many good head kicks. So, this is a tough one. I'm going to lean a little bit toward, for the number one pick, I'm going to have to lean a little bit towards Anderson Silva's Vitor Belfort at UFC 126. That was so freaking
that
sick.
Front kick was sweet.
Yeah, it was the greatest kick. Yeah, I think it was the greatest kick in MMA history. Like, so it's an iconic image. Again, Cole, I think Esther Lee took the picture of, the sideways angle of Anderson throwing that kick up and Vitor's jaw just bending
Wasn't
backwards.
that was the first out kick knockout in UFC, wasn't it?
It's not a kick, Cole, it's a front kick.
Or front kick, sorry.
Yeah, I think so. There was a couple other ones, which I'll name in a second here. But yeah, as far as up kicks, there's only been a few, Cole, like Nico Price, and then John Fitch had one a long time ago against Alves, I believe. But yeah, the front kick, I think that could have been, especially the most prominent one. I think you might be right. But yeah, that was an insane knockout. And like I said, it's kind of tough to pick just one. So some other ones that I have to mention here. I was here for this fight, UFC 129, Lyoto Machida against Randy Couture. That was insane too. Same kick. That was a flying crane kick. It's not the same, but it's a front kick essentially. Randy's teeth went flying into the crowd. That was insane. Ended Randy's career. That was an insane knockout too. It's crazy how much happened this decade, Cole. And you gotta mention Edson Barboza against Terry Edom. That was insane too. The spinning wheel kick. I mean, that just was absolutely vicious. And again, Terry Edom's not the same guy he once was. He's had a lot of issues since then. And for Barboza, it really catapulted him. I actually was at Edson Rosa's UFC debut, Cole. That was in Detroit. I drove down with my friends. That was the first UFC card. That was in 2010 as well. So much happened this decade, man. Like at the beginning of this decade, Cole, I was a fan who wanted to cover the sport, and I was just finishing school. And then, a decade later, I cover it full time. So it's been a crazy decade for me personally, but these fights and the fighters are what make it special, Cole. So, there's some other ones you can mention on this list. Like, honestly, I know people hate him, but Vitor Belfort, when he knocked out Luke Rockhold, that spinning wheel kick, that was insane too. That's a good one. Or even JDS against Mark Hunt. That's another crazy one. There's a lot of good ones. Cole, any more you want to think of, Cole, that we didn't mention?
Well, even this year, like Mazel Ask and that knee, just that quick, like that's up there. Like, even this year, I had so many good knockouts. Like
I know
Shevchenko, that head kick. Like if you're talking kicks, that was a good one. Kevin Lee's head kick knockout over Gillespie, that was another good knockout. Like there was a lot of really good knockouts. A lot of but yeah, that Silva Belfort one. That one was still crazy just to watch and see that picture. Just like see what his face looked like when the kick landed. It was crazy.
Oh, I agree 100%. I'm just looking at Tapology's list here, which I didn't do before, but I'm just looking at it now. I think we named a lot of them. Oh, yeah, of course, we mentioned this. Ronda Rousey against Holly Holm. I mean, you have to mention that. We'll talk about that a little bit later. And this was a crazy one, too. More of like a crazy comeback, but it's on this list here. Cheick Kongo versus Pat Barry. I don't know if you remember that fight, Cole, but have you seen that fight, Cole?
I think so. I think,
Cole, if you have not seen that fight, go back and watch that fight as soon as we're on the show. Pat Barry versus Cheick Kongo was one of the craziest fights you'll ever see. Go back and watch that fight, okay? Anyways, let's move on to the next one. Submission of the year. Submission of the decade, excuse me. Go ahead.
I'm going Demetrius Johnson, that what are they, Mighty Wizbar, I think they named it, over Ray Borg. Just to see him do that, Demetrius Johnson obviously dominated all his opponents, but to throw Ray Borg up in the air and catch his arm to set up the armbar, that's one of the coolest things. I didn't think of that was a move that could ever be done, to throw someone up and catch their arm while midair and then get him into an armbar. That armbar right away was immediately tight and Borg tapped. Just that submission, just the set of the submission, I don't think we will ever see it again. If we do, we'll be at flyweight. I don't think any other weight class to be able to throw someone up in the air like that and catch him. But yeah, just that setup and how it finished, like to me, that's the submission of the decade.
Yeah, great submission, Cole. I think there's a lot of good submissions as well, but for me, for sure, it's got to be Korean Zombie against Leonard Garcia. And I remember watching this fight with my friends. Like, I always have a story for this fight. I always remember where I watched almost every fight. And this fight, we were watching my friend's basement on his computer. This was this is 2011, so actually March 2011. I was still in school at the time. I remember going to my friend's house. I was watching this fight, and we've never seen that submission before. He did it right with 1 second left in the second round. And again, now it's happened second time with Bryce Mitchell this year, which is crazy. But, at the time, Cole, like, it was so crazy. Like, it really was an insane move. And, it's pretty much when I was already a fan of Korean Zombie because it was fights in WEC. That first fight with Leonard Garcia is insane too. In 2010 at WC 48, which actually was this decade as well, which is crazy to think that WC actually existed at the beginning of this decade. When you think about it, it's all the Strikeforce. And we should talk about Strikeforce later because, the purchase of Strikeforce really changed the history of MMA as well. We're going to talk about that a little bit later, Cole, when we get to like significant storylines and also news. But yeah, as far as submissions go, for me, it's got to be Jung against Garcia. Just an insane submission. All right, next up, event of the decade. Go ahead. UFC event of the decade. We're going to do outside UFC after. Go ahead.
Yeah, there were a lot of good UFC events. Like, just name a couple. Like UFC 200. Just look at that one. UFC 205, the first one, Madison Square, and you had Thompson, Woodley. That fight was amazing. Then you had McGregor. But mine is UFC 217. If you look at that card, like, you had all three champions, their belts changed hands. You had the knockout by Namius over Andrade. You had the knockout of Dillashaw over Garbrandt. Then you had St. Pierre beating Bisping. But then even lower on the card, like, you had the second fight of the night was Curtis Blades versus Alexio Olenek. Like, you had a lot of good names. You had Paulo Costa defeating Johnny Hendricks to open up the main card. You had Thompson beating Mazal in a good fight. You had Owen St. Preux, like the head kick over Corey Anderson. That card just had so many names. That was the second year they did MSG. They really tried to stack it, and it proved. And just like all three champions changing hands, I don't know if we'll ever see that again. Like, that was one of the most shocked things this past decade too.
Yeah, amazing card. I remember that one as well. I was at my friend Dustin Parks' house, and I think James was there actually watching that card with you, if I'm not mistaken. And we didn't expect the three titles to change hands. Like, ever since like the prelims of that card, you knew it was going to be special. Like the Ricardo Ramos spinning back elbow up to the OSP and Corey Anderson knockout, and then obviously the main card with the three title fights. I only predicted one of those three. I did predict Dillashaw against Garbrandt, but I didn't expect GSP to win after a 4-year layoff, and I certainly didn't expect Rose to knock out Joanna. So crazy card, Cole, great pick. For me, again, this is not easy to pick because there's been so many good cards, but I honed down to two cards. I'm going to lean slightly towards UFC 189, very slightly, because UFC 129, which I'll talk about in a sec, is also an amazing card. But UFC 189, for me, it's going to be the number one pick, Cole, because the main card is the greatest main card I think ever. Look at this main card, Cole. First fight of the night, Thomas Almeida defeats Brad Pickett via flying knee. Then you had Gunnar Nelson defeats Brandon Thatch via submission. Jeremy Stevens defeats Dennis Bermudez via third-round TKO, which was an incredible fight. Robbie Lawler defeats Rory McDonald via knockout in the fifth round, which was incredible. And then Conor McGregor against Chad Mendes knocks him out in the second round. Amazing main card. And even the prelims, though, you had Matt Brown defeats Tim Means, and you had a couple other fights. The prelims weren't as good, obviously, but the main card, Cole, has got to be up there. But, like I said, there's another pick here in UFC 129 and another card that means so much to me. And once again, Cole, you were in your diapers when this card happened. But, for me, Cole, this was an insane card. I remember I watched this one with my dad. Me and my dad went down to Rogers Center. It was called, I think it was Rogers Center. It might have been Skydome at the time. But actually, it might have been Skydome, Cole. I can't remember. But, yeah, an incredible card, an amazing card, UFC 129. The first fight just, set the tone for the rest of the night. Pablo Garza defeated Yves Dubois with a flying triangle choke, which you don't see very often. Insane. And then you had John McDessie knock out Kyle Watson with a spinning back fist. He was down for like 10 minutes after the fight. People were very concerned. I was very concerned. Jason Dahl defeated Ryan Jensen via triangle. Ivan Menjivar defeats Charlie Valencia via an elbow and punches. That was insane. The Claude Patrick Daniel Roberts fight wasn't very good. Then you had Jake Ellenberger knock out Sean Pearson. Rory McDonald slammed Nate Diaz around the canvas. And then the main card, Benson Henderson Bocek, that wasn't a very good fight. But you had Badashenko defeat Brills by knockout in 20 seconds. Machida Couture. And then you had Jose Aldo versus Mark Hominick. You talk about best fights of the decade. That's up there too, Cole. That was an insane fight, an insane comeback. Mark Hominick, he had like an alien growing on his head. People were like, man, this guy's going to come back and beat Aldo in the fifth round. And he almost did. And the fight was close. Look at the scorecards of that fight, Cole. 48-45, 48-46, 49-46. That's about as close as it got in Aldo's early career when he was dominating everyone. Of course, the main event sucked. The GSP Jake Shields fight was not very good. It was a very boring fight, but the rest of the card was absolutely amazing. And again, that was special for me, Cole, because I got to see it with my dad, and that was a special time. I also got to watch UFC 140 with my dad. We went live to that one as well. And again, this was like right when I was starting my career, before I was able to even go to events as a media member. But UFC 140 was an amazing cartoon in Toronto, Cole. That was at Eric.
That was when Jones choked out Machida.
Yes, sir. Jones choked out Machida with a guillotine. Frank Mir broke Nogueira's shoulder with a Kimura, which was insane. Then you had Little Nog knock out T. Ortiz. You had Chan Sung Jung knock out Mark Hominick in 7 seconds. Krajicek knocked out Serginski. Philippou knocked out Hammond. Dennis Hallman submitted McDessie. And you had some other ones in the prelims still, but very, very good card. And I love that card as well. So, those cards mean a lot to me. And, I always say that it's not just the cards themselves, but like who you watch them with and where you watch them. Yeah. That stuff matters a lot too. And that stuff I always remember. So for me, those are some great memories, Cole. And memories will last a lifetime, man. All right, next up, we're going to go to, oh, crap. I think I sent it to you. What is it? Upset of the decade. Go ahead.
Yeah, upset. There was a lot. I'm honestly going to go one that happened last year that I did. It might not be a huge upset, but to me at the time, I thought there was no way it's going to happen. It was Nunes knocking out Cyborg. I thought that fight, I just thought Cyborg was too good. I thought Cyborg it was so dominant. She's been so dominant. I didn't think Nunes was going to go out there. And then the way it happened too, that fight for not even the minute it lasted, it was crazy. I know odds-wise it wasn't a big upset, but just watching that, watching it with friends, I'm just like, oh, I think Cyborg's going to win. I talked to Cyborg before that fight. I'm just like, I don't think Nunes is going to win this fight. And then just to see how it played out and what happened, that was one of the biggest upsets to me this past decade.
Yeah, as far as the odds go, they weren't that high, Cole, but I agree with you, man, because the way the fight played out, I didn't expect that to happen. They were going at it toe to toe, and again, I remember watching that fight with James Lynch and Steve Jeffrey, two of my friends, and we were at Steve's house in Oakville, and that was a crazy, crazy knockout. And wow, I mean, honestly, Cole, as far as 1 minute fight, that's the greatest 1 minute fight of MMA history. That was the most action I've ever seen packed in a 1 minute fight. For me, it's got to be Ronda Rousey and Holly Holm for the significance of it. I honestly was not completely shocked that she lost. I was actually one of the people that thought that she had a good chance to win, Holly Holm. I remember people were calling me an idiot, saying I don't know what I was talking about. I was like, I think Holly Holm could win, because I remember seeing her come up on Access TV, and I was like, man, this girl can kick and she can punch, and she's a professional boxer, a kickboxer. She could win this fight. And no one believed me, and I was like, all right, I'll go with the consensus here. And I ended up picking Ronda, and Holly ended up winning by knockout. Now, the crazy thing about this fight is, Cole, I was actually at work. I used to work at the Toronto Star, and I worked really late hours. So I'd have to tape the pay-per-views and then go home and watch them. Now, I remember walking back home, and my mom and sister actually, I remember looking in the front door. We had drapes covering our front window, and I looked in, and I couldn't see much, but I remember looking in. I was like, is that Holly Holm being interviewed? And I had no idea, so I walked in. I said, don't tell me what happened. I'm going to watch the card. And then she kicked her out, and I was like, I did see that happen. That's crazy. So for me, that's, again, another memory. I just remember walking down the street and looking in the window and seeing her being interviewed. So, that was an insane knockout, Cole, and an amazing finish. Next up, let's go to Rivalry of the Decade. Go ahead, Cole.
My rivalry of the decade is John Jones and Daniel Cormier. That lasted quite a few years. It's still ongoing. That lead up, and just, I know it was 2 fights and 2 wins for John Jones, but their rivalry's still there just because of everything that happened. You had Cormier after the first fight, and then Jones got suspended. You had Cormier become the light heavyweight champ, but people didn't think Cormier was a real champ. They thought, oh, Jones is still a champ. And every interview, he's like, oh, John Jones, I'm waiting for you. John Jones, get your shit together. John Jones, we got to fight. We got a belt to fight for. Then when he came back, UFC 214, that was a really hyped up fight. And then the knockout and then ended the rivalry. But then you had Cormier crying. That got memed and everything. But they're still ongoing because then he failed a drug test. And now they might do it at heavyweight. Just everything that's happened, they both brought the bad side out of each other. Even John Jones after his first fight, the way he interviewed, he even told Rogan, he's like, I'm sorry I'm being classless, but I just don't like the guy. And Cormier, even if you watch the E30 or whatever they're called on ESPN, the documentary they did on Cormier, like even his wife is like, we don't want to fight John Jones because it brings out such the bad out of him. But just the two fights are entertaining, and just the lead to the fights are entertaining. So that's my rivalry of the decade.
Yeah, and a great pick, Cole. And I remember, I was in Greece at the time on vacation. I remember seeing the press conference where John Jones shoved Daniel Cormier and Dave Schaller got in the middle of it. That was a very famous incident. I remember, like I said, I was on vacation. I remember watching that. It was crazy. So great pick, Cole. For me, again, I'm going back. I go back to the early part of the decade for a lot of these, but this is like when I really, became, the sport became like really important to me. So for me, it's going to be Chael Sonnen versus Anderson Silva, Cole. Like, I think newer fans don't realize how heated this rivalry was, at the time. The first fight between Chael Sonnen and Anderson Silva, UFC 117, Cole, that was crazy. And I remember where I was. I was at the bar at the Madison, downtown Toronto. I was at school at the time, and it's a big famous bar, still is. And I watched with my friends, and we were all like watching it, and we're like, wow, Chael Sonnen's going to beat Anderson Silva. And then fifth round, he pulls out the triangle choke out of nowhere. So an insane comeback by you talk about comebacks of the decade, Cole. That's right there too, man. That was insane. That probably is the comeback of the decade, actually, when you think about it. But the rematch, the lead up to that rematch, I remember Anderson said, I'm going to break Chael's teeth, and Chael said, I'm going to cook your wife a steak dinner. Like, it was crazy. It was insane. And then Anderson obviously smashed Chael in the rematch. But, man, Cole, that rivalry was amazing, and those guys really, made MMA really fun to watch in the early part of the decade.
Right, even you still see that like thing where you still see Chael Sonnen when Anderson's in the crowd. Like you still see clips on Twitter where it's like, Anderson Silva, you absolutely suck. Like you still see those clips.
Talk about greatest quotes, Cole, of the decade. We didn't even do that category. That's got to be the greatest quote of the decade, I think.
Yeah,
who is that guy? That might be up there too. But that was good. That one's good, man. So yeah, I'm with you on that. All right, next up, let's do biggest story of the decade. Go ahead, my man.
The biggest story for me is let's just say. It's just the Reebok deal and how bad that's turned out. Like, I liked the uniqueness when they walked out and what happened, and then like you obviously had GSP walk out with his famous stuff. You had like it added character, like it added the fighters. And the Reebok deal is supposed to be like, oh, they're getting uniforms. It's making MMA like more like well known around because they have uniforms and whatnot, like every other sport. But just see how that's bad turned out. Like you see the Reebok payouts, some fighters making like $4,000 off Reebok. Like you could get so many sponsors on your shorts. Like John Jones had Gatorade. Like Gatorade is paying him. They had Gatorade and Nike when he fought Gustafsson. Those are paying way more than $4,000. And the fighters already don't get paid enough. And I'm all like fighters getting paid more, then take more money out of their pocket with this Reebok deal. And just I don't know. Like it might not be the base to me though. It's just like I don't like what it's become, and it really turned out to be for the worse for the fighters.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. That's a really good pick. And again, we want to pick different things here. So for me, I told you, Cole, it's going to be for me. This is a tough one because now that I think about it, I think there's going to be two. I'm going to name two, but I'll go with the first one. I'll go with the drug testing and changes in drug testing, especially in the early part of the decade. TRT, and no one talks about this anymore, but it was a huge topic in the sport. All these guys were using it. Chael Sonnen, Dan Henderson, all these guys, Frank Mir, like a lot of guys were using it. A lot of guys were abusing it, saying, going to their doctor and saying that they needed this, and the doctor laying them. And all this media members were wondering, like, how the hell do these guys are like the greatest athletes in the world need testosterone replacement? Like, it didn't make sense. Of course, it ended up being banned. The UFC saw that there was a big loophole going on. Guys were abusing it. So they banned it, and then they brought in USADA really soon after. And USADA, I think, really changed the sport because, honestly, Cole, and it's still a dirty – MMA is a dirty sport. A lot of sports are dirty. MMA is a dirty sport. It was really dirty at the beginning of the decade, and especially in the 2000s. The 2000s and the 1990s, a lot of guys were juiced up. Go back and watch old Pride events. Go watch the old UFC events. Everyone's juicing. Guys are still juicing. You still see guys get caught. But before USADA, it was even worse. So, for me, that's got to be up there. And the other one, and I mentioned this earlier, the acquisition of Strikeforce. That's an underrated – thing that happened this decade because I think it changed the way the MMA landscape was, and also it changed the UFC history. Cole, if you look at who they brought in for Strikeforce, almost like all of them, like a lot of guys became champions. You look at the list. Let's go through it. Daniel Cormier. He was the heavyweight Grand Prix champion in Strikeforce. He won the UFC heavyweight and light heavyweight titles. Luke Rockhold, middleweight champion. Amanda Nunes. She won the women's featherweight and bantamweight titles. Chris Cyborg, featherweight champion. Let's keep going.
Rousey.
Ronda Rousey was a champion.
Woodley, Lawler.
Who else, Cole?
You had Woodley, Lawler. Like
Woodley. Lawler,
Most
Nick, yeah,
champions came. I think Strikeforce was
Alistair Overeem, Fabricio Verdum, Cole. It was insane.
most. I think Strikeforce was the closest thing to taking over the UFC. Like, I would love to see
Amazing.
if they were still alive.
Promotion.
If they were still alive, like, it would be so interesting to see what would happen if Strikeforce be there. Strikeforce had, like, if you had Rousey, you had, like, I don't know, and then you would have never had Jones DC rivalry. Like, you wouldn't have all these so good fights, and then, like, that was and they didn't even get it for that much because Strikeforce thought they were, like, on the outs. But man, like, just seeing who they got, like, that tells a huge win for the UFC.
Yeah, it's Strikeforce is an amazing promotion. It really was. I loved watching their events. They put them on Showtime. Great events. And I loved how they have Strikeforce challengers. You know, that was something that I wish the UFC kept around. Now they have Dana White's Contender Series, which I guess is like that. But man, the Strikeforce challengers was pretty cool too. A lot of guys ended up becoming champs. But yeah, Cole, you look at the list of fighters in that promotion, so many talented fighters. An amazing promotion. I'm gonna get some questions, Cole, and then we'll go back to the topics here and the awards. Let's go to the questions here from Kenshiro Rio Dojo. I always appreciate your questions, man. Real anger and hate for each other makes great fights. We're not in tennis sport. Our male and female players don't wear pretty skirts. It's a fight, and the more personal, better. I'm with you on that, my friend. And continue on here. Reebok deals all kinds of horrible. What's even more amazing is UFC came out with that fiasco doing well and didn't hurt their profit, making one bit 5 years later. Yep. Reebok made fans and fighters hate their brand. They would be better off just signing and sponsoring top fighters like normal sponsors instead. Remember, John Jones beat all the just juicers while being on the juice, so it makes him the go and nulls and voids his juice. That's hilarious. Yeah, good points about the Reebok deal, though, Cole. I hate it personally. I changed the sport, I think, for the worse. Just made it so cookie cutter. I loved when fighters were able to wear whatever they wanted, Cole. Like, it just brought more personality. Like, again, I talked about this yesterday, Cole. You think about a guy like Chuck Liddell, the Iceman shorts. Imagine he was wearing Reebok shorts. Like, it's not the same, So to me, it's something that actually has not been very good for the sport. But the UFC is, they're kind of they're off to themselves.
With the most surprising news.
Most surprising news, yeah, for me, I'm gonna go with Ben Askren being traded for Demetrius Johnson or vice versa. I guess I was shocked, Cole. First off, first trade in MMA history, never seen that. But I was just surprised the UFC. I know they didn't like Demetrius Johnson. Honestly, like, the guy's a great fighter, but he's not like his personality is not exciting. Let's be honest here, Cole. Great fighter though. He does have exciting fights, but the personality just never matched what the UFC likes promoting. But I was still surprised they traded him, especially for Ben Askren, Dana White hated for all those years. So that's going to be my pick. What's yours?
Yeah, it's not totally MMA, but like, it has some MMA related. Is McGregor Mayweather. I never thought we'd see a
Great
UFC
pick.
star go over to boxing, fight the biggest boxing star. Like, and to see Dana White cross more. Like, he's been so reluctant to do it. He doesn't want to do it. To send his biggest star to boxing, just that hype around that fight. Like, I had so many of my friends over and like to watch that fight, and it's still like it was the day before I left for like all of us left for college and stuff again. So like, just all of us getting together before we left, like, just added to the excitement of the fight. And then, like, I don't think we'll ever see that again. Like, everyone talks about fighting boxers, but I don't know if we'll ever see that again. Like, that might be like a one-time thing. Just have the biggest star in boxing history fight, or the biggest star in boxing at that time against probably the biggest star in MMA history fight. Like, I don't know if we'll ever see that again. That was surprising me that it even got done.
Mm-hmm. Good pick there, Cole. Next up, we have. Shoot, I keep missing this list for some reason. Okay, next up, we have top fighter outside the UFC of the decade. Go ahead.
It might be. I think his first half of the decade was really good, and then I have Michael Chandler. I just think what he did in Bellator. Obviously, the loss to Pitbull this year kind of hurt him, but just to see what he did, he beat Eddie Alvarez. He was a 3-time Bellator champ, defended the belt a bunch. Like, he had some really entertaining fights, beat the who's who of the Bellator's lightweight division. He's a guy everyone wanted to see in the UFC, like, especially after he beat Alvarez, and just seeing Alvarez become a UFC champ. I think it really solidified how good Michael Chandler is and how good he would have been in the UFC. And I think he's one of Bellator's best fighters on their roster still. And just to see how long he's been doing it for, like, he's been fighting before the 2010s. So to keep on being that high level is still really impressive to me.
Michael Chandler's a great pick, and Cole, he's another Strikeforce alum. He was actually fought in Strikeforce twice, and Scott Coker has him again now. But he's a guy that he didn't make it over the UFC because he left way before the acquisition. But he still is a former Strikeforce guy as well. But for me, it's going to be the guy who beat him last year, Patricio Pitbull, Cole. I mean, he edges him out Michael Chandler very slightly just because they fought head to head and he knocked him out. So I know Michael Chandler's maybe not the same guy he once was. He did look good in his last fight, but For Pitbull to go in there and knock him out, I think that edged him really slightly, in my opinion, over him. Double champion, 18-4 in the decade, amazing record. Michael Chandler in the decade had a 18-5 record, so really close call, 18-5 versus 18-4. I'm going to slightly lean towards Pitbull, but they're both great picks. All right, best event not in the UFC of the decade. Go ahead.
I have a Bellator 158. You have obviously Kimbo Slice fighting in that, and then there's just getting the full card up here. But there were so many good fights on that card. There's a lot of big names in Bellator. They really stacked that card, and to see Kimbo Slice still fight in MMA was just cool. And where?
Well, 158. I don't think
158. Sorry,
what is it? You got the wrong one here, man. I'm looking at
it.
Yeah,
just a second.
It's all right. No worries. Let's see here. I'm going to check. Bellator 138?
Yeah, that was it. Sorry. 138. I typed it in wrong. So then you had Patricio Freire defending his belt against Daniel White. Bobby Lashley, who's a big star. You had Michael Chandler open the card, submitting. Like, the entire main card was all finishes. You had Kimbo Slice knock out Ken Shamrock. You had Patricio Pitbull knock out Dan Weichel. You had Bobby Lashley TKO Jan Charles. You had Daniel Strauss submit Henry Corrales. And Michael Chandler submit Derek Campos. All those names, like, especially the opening guys, they're huge stars in Bellator now. Then even on the prelims, you had a lot of, like, you had a Darstroke, you had a bunch of finishes too. And just the names around it and how that event played out is just my event, non-UFC of the decade.
Yeah, I know you mentioned Bellator 58 when we were talking as well.
Yeah.
That's why you were confused. And Bellator 58, that was Chandler versus Alvarez.
Yeah, that's where I got mixed views. I put the one.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, that was a crazy fight. And also Hector Lombard was on the card. You talk about, we didn't do this, but biggest bust in UFC history, Hector Lombard might be the number.
He'd be right up there.
He did not perform the way we thought. I think, talk about USADA, Cole. USADA did not help Hector Lombard. For me, it's going to be WSOF 2, and this was an amazing event. I remember watching this one and just being absolutely in awe. It was like it was a second card, and it was an amazing card. Like, you start with, let's go for the main card and then go right down. But main eventing, you had Anthony Johnson defeat Artur Arlovsky. That was a heavyweight fight. He moved up to heavyweight, and this was a few fights after AJ being cut from the UFC for missing weight by, like, I think he missed by 10 pounds against Vitor. They cut him. He goes to WSOF, and he didn't knock him out, but he hurt Arlovsky, broke his jaw. Decision, but also on the card you had Marlon Moraes Cole defeat Tyson Nam by knockout. That was an incredible knockout. David Branch defeats Paulo Filo. Josh Berkery defeats Aaron Simpson, and Justin Gaethje against Jay-Z Cavalcante. If I'm not mistaken, it was Justin's debut in WSOF, and I think that's where people started to realize Justin Gaethje is pretty good. That's when I became a fan of him, because I hadn't seen him fight before. I heard about him. I'd never seen him fight. But even the prelims, though, you had some crazy fights. Rick Glenn knocking out Alexander Pimentel. Waylon Logan against Cameron Dollar knocks him out. Richard Padishnock against Igor Gracie. Ozzy Dagulabov against Chris Wade. And Brenton Hansen against Tony Marcelano. That was a crazy flying knee. And Bill Alger against Frank Buenafuente. It was a crazy card. Really good card. WSOF's another promotion doesn't exist now. It's called PFL. But they put out some good fights, Cole. And again, if you look at this card, Cole, look at the people that became champions. Marlon Moraes, David Branch, Justin Gaethje. It was a good card. All right. Kenshiro Rio Doju's got a couple other comments here. I knew Ben Askren was a can since day one. He walks up in his opponents to the chicken stance. They put him money against him every fight. Thanks, Askren, for the free money. I guess it worked out in the UFC, but he didn't look too good there. He looked good in Bellator, though, and won. Kenshiro Rio Dojo, I vote for Douglas Lima's KO of MVP, low kick down to the jaw, had me seeing Street Fight 2 arcade mode, being Rory 2, and everyone else. Yeah, great pick. Douglas Lima's right there. For me, it was like either Pitbull or Lima. Like, I think those are the two guys, but or Chandler too. You really can't go wrong with any of those three guys. All right, now let's go to a funny one, Cole. Worst fight of the decade. Go ahead.
I remember being so excited for this fight when it got match time. And my brother had his friends over. I had my friends over at my house. Like, there was probably like 20 of us all watching it around TV, and some of my friends and my brother's friends are MMA fans. Saw these two guys, and they're like, oh, this is going to be a sick fight. I was talking about Ngannou Derek Lewis at 226. That was such a boring fight. They didn't throw any punches. Like, everyone expected a first-round knockout. There was so much hype into it. The two biggest knockout artists in heavyweight, two of the biggest guys in heavyweight, two of the scariest guys in heavyweight are about to throw down. You had Ngannou just losing to Miocic for the title. He obviously had a lot to prove. Derek Lewis he always has fun fights and always entertaining, like, knockouts. And just to see them not engage, like, Lewis had the bad back, and then the loss to Miocic, like, hurt and got his confidence, and he didn't want to throw. It just kind of ruined that whole like 15 minutes was boring. And then even the lead up to DC Stipe, like even people at my house, like it's still kind of left. Like, even when DC Stipe were in the octagon, people were still like, that last fight sucked. Like, I'm not even like excited for this fight anymore just because of how bad that last one was. It's fairly recent, but that fight is still one of the worst ones I've ever had to watch.
Yeah, that fight was awful. The great thing about that was I had money in Derek Lewis, so it actually was like pretty good for me. I remember like, please get the win here. It was a horrible fight though. For me, Cole, again, going back to the early part of the decade, I was in Greece at the time, and in Greece, I think the time difference is 6 or 7 hours. So I was watching this fight at like 6 or 7 in the morning, and it was horrible. And I was looking forward to see it because Gray Maynard was coming off a crazy fight with Frankie Edgar, and Clay Guida was one of the most exciting guys in the UFC. And you thought that going head to head, Clay Guida and Gray Maynard was going to be a great fight. It was one of the worst fights ever. Such a bad fight. Horrible fight. Don't ever watch that fight. It's a bad one. Really boring, and it was 5 rounds too. It was a horrible, horrible fight. All right, Cole. What's the last category there?
We have a fight we never got to see.
That's the one. Okay, go for it.
So my fight we never got to see of the decade, and I think it might happen. You never know. The one guy's come back is John Jones, Anthony Rumble Johnson. They're supposed to fight before. Like, this was the most hyped up fight at light heavyweight besides Cormier for Jones. Like, Rumble was a guy that's knocking everyone out. We've never seen Jones in trouble. We've never seen him get even tagged. So to have them go up against each other is going to be really interesting. And just to never have it happen just because of Jones's suspensions and him not being in the sport. And then obviously Rumble retiring. And he lost the big fights to Cormier, so he never got that shot when Jones was back. It's disappointing to see him come back. He's supposed to come back at heavyweight. Jones might move up to heavyweight, so hopefully we can finally see it in 2020. But that, to me, like, that would have been such a big fight and a mass fight the UFC could have put on in 2010s, and they missed out on it.
Yeah, no, that's a good one. For me, Cole, GSP Anderson Silva, how did we never see this fight? It's crazy. Like, that's the fight everyone wanted to see. GSP and Anderson were the number 1 and number 2 power pound fighters, really interchangeable at the beginning of the decade. You still talk about best fighters of all time. I mean, GSP is in the top 3, I think, and Anderson's still up there. But I think the later part of his career hurt his legacy a little bit, Cole, those losses and also the steroid test and stuff. But, GSP and Anderson was a fight that I wanted to see. I remember I was in Montreal for the fight with Carlos Condit and GSP. And that was a crazy fight too. You talk about crazy fights. That was up there because Carlos Condit had this head kick knockdown in the 3rd round. Everyone thought GSP was going out. Somehow survived it, ended up winning decision. But Anderson was in the crowd, and they showed him on the big screen, and everyone's like, "Wow, they're gonna make this fight." It never happened, Cole. At this point in time, 2020, I don't think that fight's ever gonna happen, unfortunately. But Cole, that's a fight I really want to see, especially in their prime. Cole, I really had no idea how it's gonna go. I think most people would have leaned a little bit towards GSP because of the wrestling, especially after we saw the Chael Sonnen fight. But man, that's a fight that I really wanted to see, and it's unfortunately never happened. A couple other questions here. Kenshiro Ryu Doju. Worst fight was Rainboy Theodoro versus Derek Brunson. Horrible display of crappy MMA skills. Hey, and he got cut after that. So I hope he learned from that fight because it was a horrible fight. And then GSP Khabib's a fight I want to see, and so is Khabib's dad. That fight, I don't think. Don't be surprised if it happens. I think there's a chance that could happen, Cole. I know it's crazy, a small chance. I could see it happening like in the next year, honestly. Because I think GSP would come back for that fight, and I think for Khabib, he's only got a few fights left. Cole, he goes and beats Ferguson. Maybe the Conor rematch with Gaethje, but there's not many that fights left for him. He wants to be 30-0. He's got 2 fights. Maybe he'll stay for another one, but he will retire early. I think Khabib, because he's made a lot of money, and I think he's a smart guy. He doesn't want to, take damage. That's a lot, Cole. That was a lot. Anything else? I mean, any more thoughts? Like any other categories we didn't get to?
No, I think that was quite a few. We got quite a few. We're just kind of figuring out from yesterday, just adding categories. I think we got probably all of it. That.
Yeah, I mean, it was an incredible decade. Any reflection on the decade, like personally and professionally, like as far as fights go?
Well, just personally, like just to see how far the sport's come, and just like I remember watching it with my dad, like even just like when I was in like elementary school, just watching, like my dad would have like the Fight Network on there pretty old, like WEC fights and like Cowboy be fighting. I'd be like, oh, this is sick. And my dad was one of those parents, like he didn't care. He let me watch fight when I was like 7, 8 years old. And just like growing up watching that, and then obviously making this my profession, and then having like I watch most events with my brothers, and then that just adds to it. Like having my brother there with me, and we share all the moments. Like it's just to see how far the sport's evolved in 10 years. Like I don't think, like if you look at NBA from 2010 to 2020, or NHL and MLB, not much change. But to see MMA from 2010 to 2020, like there's a massive difference in production and all that stuff.
Yeah, it has evolved a lot. I have a lot of thoughts about this personally, but like for me, I finished university in 2010, and at the time, I really didn't know what I wanted to do. I had to make a decision. I was like, what am I going to do? Go back to grad school? Um, get a job? Like, what do I want to do? I really didn't know because I never, when I was growing up, Cole, there was never like a job I wanted to do. I didn't want to be like a firefighter or a policeman or a construction worker or something. I never really had a goal, I guess, as far as like profession. I went to school and I got my university degree in writing, and I thought maybe I could do this. I don't know, and I got into that sports journalism program in 2011, and because I had to do something, I know I needed to go back to school for a year and figure it out a little bit. And I remember just that was really when I was getting into MMA at the beginning of the decade, the latter part of last decade. And I was like, I think I could do this for a career. And I remember going to school, and I told the guy who was running the program, Malcolm Kelly, I want to rival MMA for a career. And he just laughed at me. He's like, no, you can't do that. Like, no one does that. No one has a career in this. Like, it's not going to work. 10 years later, man, I'm making really good money, dude. And I get to cover MMA, Cole. So, people doubted me. And, there was times I doubted myself, man. I mean, this has been an up and down career. It's been a tough career because, like, man, I've had good opportunities that disappeared, or, opportunities that I wish I had back, or, things that I think should have happened for me that didn't. But I wouldn't change any of it, Cole. I'm doing well, so I'm happy with the way it's worked out. But I remember, just wanting to do MMA and people just kind of just really doubting me and saying you can't do that. The only people that really believed me were my family because they thought you can do anything you set your mind to, and if you want to do this, do it. But trust me, man, it's been tough. Like a lot of times, my family's like, you're not going to make any money in this, and do something else. But they kept encouraging me, just stick with it if you like it, and it's going well now, Cole. So for me personally, like this is something that I love, especially beginning part of the decade and last decade. I was very like just confused about my life because I didn't really know what I want to do, and MMA gave me something to aspire to and something to chase. So truthfully, I haven't had as much success as I wanted. Um, I saw a lot of my peers go on to really bigger and better things, and they're all at the events now, covering it every week, and they get to fly around the world. That didn't really happen to me, but I still had some great opportunities. But honestly, like the people that did take a chance on me, like Nick Kalikas at Fight Odds at MMA Oddsbreaker. Cole, I've been with MMA Oddsbreaker since 2012, and Nick's been an incredible boss, and I'm a really good friend too. So I'm very thankful, I'm very grateful. MMA Ratings, Michael hired me in 2012. I've been there for 8 years now too, almost. So he's been amazing. And then of course BJ Penn, which is going really well. I love the guys there, the team. But it's been a crazy time because I remember I was at the Score in 2011, Cole, and I thought when I was at the Score, this is going to be my career. I'm going to work at the Score. And then it got bought up by Sportsnet. They let me go. That was a huge shock. I remember waking up that morning and having my job gone. I was like, wow. They're like, we have to let you go. You got bought out. It got released. I was like, wow, what the hell? They're like, don't come to the office. Don't get your stuff. We're going to send it to you. I was like, wow, what the hell? And then I went to Sportsnet for a few years, and Sportsnet, they didn't pay me anything, Cole. I did it out of my pocket. I did it out of my own pocket because I love the sport. Me and James never got paid anything, and James can tell you the same thing. We did it because we loved it. And they were really they're just scummy about it, and they kept telling both of us, we'll pay you guys. And we just did it because we loved it. And for James, it really worked out well because he got to all the events, and now he's obviously doing really well at the new Score. Not the Score that I used to work for. It's a new Score now. But for me personally, like I just got tired of, just being, used for my labor. So that sucked. But at the time, it was a good opportunity. And of course, I got to go to some events like, Diaz and GSP Montreal. I went to Sportsnet. But again, I paid for that stuff. I just got the credentials and the access, but they never gave me anything, Cole. They just, had me write, and I just did it because with the promise of, bigger and better things. It never happened. But now it's finally happening. Again, I'm making a living out of this now. So it took a long time, Cole. But it's going really well now, man. And again, it's been a crazy year, crazy decade for me personally. Like just a lot of stuff in my personal life, and but the one thing that's always been there's MMA. So for me, it's been everything, man, because it means a lot to me. The sport just means a lot to me. That's why I got the nickname MMA. That was from college, because they knew I loved it. And it's been good for me. And anyways, Katsura Doju, who's your favorite female fighter? Oh, sorry, Habib versus Tony's a fight that Curse will never see the fight. If I was Habib's team, I'd injure my own fighter, keep him away from Tony, and keep that record perfect. Yeah, I don't know. We're gonna see that fight, man. I hope so. I'm crossing my fingers. Who's your favorite female fighter, Valentina or Willie Zhang? I don't know. Who's your favorite?
Out of those two?
I guess. I mean, I favorites. I might be Joanna. I love Joanna, man. But
I like Joanna. Like out of those two, I'd say Valentina.
Jang versus Valentina, who you got? I don't know. Tough one to call. Probably Valentina, bigger.
Yeah.
Improvement. We all know Zhang's on the juice. Do you guys think Valentina's on the juice? I have no idea, man. I'm so young, got a good future in MMA. Thanks, buddy. I'm 31, so I'm pretty young compared to a lot of the guys doing the sport. You know, MMA allows us to pay and make money, still doing it legal. One enjoy your fighting Saturday is very true. You know, yeah, but anyways, it's been a crazy decade for me because I don't get to reflect on it a lot. But yeah, it's 2020, so it's pretty nuts. You know, the one thing that you know, for me, I think that I never realized was like, you know, I would say I'm a really like, you know, uh helpful person and someone that's always trying to look out for other people, you know, Cole, and I kind of try to take you under my wing and stuff. And I always thought people were doing the same thing for me, but I think it took me a long time to realize that people, um, you know, they were kind of selfish and they actually saw me as a threat, not as their friend. And it was one of those things, you keep your friends closer, friends close, enemies closer. And a lot of people, you know, pretended to be my friend and they went on to bigger and better things. And I don't need to name names, but there's a lot of guys out there, and you know, they you know, didn't help me out, and I think they got really big opportunities, you know, that I should have got a long time ago, and I never got them. So, you know, I think I've learned from that, Cole. But I won't ever change who I am as a journalist, and as a friend. You know, I'm a very genuine person, and you know, I keep my friends close, and I'm lucky I have, like, you know, good friends like yourself and James and Aaron that have been my friends for a long time. I mean, I guess me and you were friends, Cole, but you know, James and Aaron, I've been friends with James since 2012. He remember 2011, actually, he messaged me on Twitter and he was like, "Hey, man, you know, I noticed you work at the Score. I'm fighting out. We should be friends." And me and James are still talking 10 years later. So, you know, same with Aaron. Aaron was the first person to hire me. Look at Aaron now; he's doing so good. You know, these are not the guys that are haters. These guys are genuinely friends. But there's other people out there that pretended to be my friends, Cole, and they never were. They just wanted it for themselves, man. So, you know, best advice I can give you, Cole, just, you know, just be careful who you associate yourself with, because you know, some people seem like they have good intentions, but really they're trying to further themselves, not you. And you'll do well in this business, man. It's a good business. You know, it's a tough business, but if you can excel in this business, you can do well. You know, people say there's no money, and there is money. You got to work your ass off, though. I work 7 days a week. You know, I don't take a day off, and you know, I wouldn't have it any other way. I honestly wouldn't. Anyways, man. Anything else you want to talk about, Cole? Anything else?
No, I think that's all.
All right, buddy. Plug your stuff.
Twitter at ColeShot91. Just today, spoke to Clarissa Shields, promoter, and talked about the Nunes fight. Says it's the biggest women's sporting event of all time if it happens. Then I also spoke to Gilbert Burns about the Maya fight. Sats up on BJ Penn. Everything else is on my Twitter.
Awesome, man. All right. You guys can follow me on Twitter at Adam Martin, and then MMAoddsbreaker.com. That's obviously the home of the podcast, and I'll hopefully have some writing up starting next week. Cole hopefully be joining the team very soon as well. We'll get Cole on the website. Also check me out at bjpenn.com, MMA Rings. And, you know, again, since this is a Decades podcast, just want to give, you know, some shout outs here for sure to my family for, you know, supporting me even through the ups and downs of this, because MMA is kind of crazy, but it's, you know, it's worked out okay. To Nick, I mean, Nick, man, you know, Nick gave me a chance, and you know, Nick is a really good friend, so great guy. And of course, Michael MMA Rings, another, you know, guy who gave me a chance when I needed it. You know, Scott, Tom, Chris, all the guys at BJ Penn, those guys are important to me. Of course, James, my former podcast host, really good friend still. Aaron, first guy who ever gave me a job in this business, man. Cole, you for doing the podcast with me, man. And you know, all the readers, man, all the viewers, all the listeners. You know, I'm just a guy who loves the sport, you know, and I'm just very lucky that I'm able to actually make a living out of this somehow. Something that I love to do, and just want to thank all you guys for the support. So I don't want to get too emotional here, but you know, it's been a very up and down journey, and I've made so many mistakes over the way, and you know, I've learned from them, but I've made a lot of mistakes. I'm just glad that I'm still here, man. I'm still doing it. So once again, guys, really thank you for everything. Cole, great podcast today, man, as always. And guys, have a great day. I'll be back tomorrow for a Thursday edition of the podcast. And once again, thanks for doing it. I'm not going to cry, man. Don't worry, I'm not going to cry.
It's not that good of a fight.
Yeah, no. I only cry when I watch good fights like Gustafsson and Jones, bro. That's what Kenshiro Joju's saying. Nah, it's all good, man. I'm not going to cry. But I just getting emotional, man. Just thinking about, all the years. The years go by so fast.
Oh,
You don't
yeah.
realize how fast your life really goes by. 10 years ago, Cole, I was your age, man. I was 20 years old, dude. Now I'm 31. It's crazy, right? Or I guess 21 years old. I didn't go 11 years and 10 years. Anyways, thanks, Ben, for joining us. Guys, have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.